Welcome to a special episode of the Herald Daily Update. Last night, there was a public debate between Judy Burds and Paul Moore, the two candidates running for Milton City Council Post 2. WSB's Mike Petchenik and the Milton Herald's editor, Joe Parker, moderated the event, which was held at St. Aidan's Episcopal Church. We'll tune in just as Father Reggie Simmons is giving the invocation.
And I also want you to know that we have church services every Sunday, 8:15 and 11 o'clock. So if you have not found yourselves a church home, we would be delighted for you to come and worship alongside of us. Okay? The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, send down upon those who hold office and those who seek to hold office in this city of Milton, the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Father, and thank you for sharing this beautiful space with us tonight for the event. And I want to briefly go through the rules for tonight. I also want to let you know that we met with the candidates last week, went over the rules. There was very little negotiating. Everybody mostly agreed upon all of the rules, and so here we are tonight. First of all, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give an opening statement. And we did a coin toss last week. Mr. Moore won the coin toss and has elected to be candidate A, so he's going to go first. And Ms. Burds will be candidate B and will go second. And each candidate will be allowed to bring an open written statement and a closing statement onto the stage. And throughout the event, the debate, they're not going to have any other pre-written material with them. Each candidate is going to receive an equal number of questions. And throughout this past week, we solicited questions from the community. These are constituent-driven questions. And Joe and I also reserve the right to ask some of our own as well. Ms. Burds will get the first question since she is making the second opening statement. And here is the format. The answering candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. The second candidate, the opposing candidate, will get a minute to respond. The answering candidate will then have 30 seconds to respond if there is a rebuttal, and there will be another 30 seconds afforded to the second candidate for any rebuttal that they choose to give. We also reserve the right to ask follow-up questions, and if Joe or I ask a follow-up question, they get 30 seconds each to answer those questions. Hans has graciously offered his services tonight to be a timekeeper, and he is going to be meticulously keeping track of the time, letting the candidates know when they have 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and he will be very loudly telling the candidates when their time is up so that they know their time is up. So let's begin. I also want to let you know that the closing statements are also going to be 2 minutes apiece. So let's begin by introducing the candidates. Ms. Judy Burds. And Mr. Paul Moore. And with that, we will begin the opening statements. Please also silence your phones.
Good evening. I'm Paul Moore, and I'm running to be your next Milton City Council person. Thank you for being here this evening and for choosing to become an educated voter. Thank you to Father Reggie and St. Aidan's for the use of this facility, and thank you to Mike Petchenik and Joe Parker for moderating, and several others who helped put this evening together, and to Judy Burds for cooperating with our request for a debate. In a time of unprecedented pressure for change in Milton, your choice of future councilperson could not be more critical. Development pressure is around us, and the test we will endure have never been greater than now to protect the Milton we know and love. I have been trained and tested, and I'm up to the task of keeping Milton Milton. I'm a 22-year resident of Milton who for 21 years has been actively engaged in local land planning. When my wife Kathy and I moved here, we knew it was somewhere special, and so for 8 years before we even became a city, I frequently spoke before the Fulton County Commissioners to ensure careful land planning. That role is what helped to shape what became Milton. I took my role to the next level when we became a city, and Mayor Lockwood appointed me to the Planning Commission. I was appointed based on my reputation of being a strong and successful voice for conservative planning. I've been serving for Mayor Lockwood and for you for the past 13 years, delivering that conservative vision. My passion for Milton has never been stronger. That's why I've chosen to serve for you for 13 years as a volunteer. It would be my honor to continue to serve you now on City Council and to ensure that what we've created withstands the pressures for development that's upon us. As such, my platform is about keeping Milton Milton. I oppose high-density development. I stand for conservative, smart growth and strict adherence to the comprehensive land use plan. I stand for maximizing active and passive park opportunities, and I stand for traffic calming and road safety measures to keep our community safe. I have 21 years of training and experience to prepare to be your best voice for Milton. I hope to earn your vote this evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for coming this evening. I think I had a chance to speak with each of you, and a big thanks to our moderators as well. A little bit about me. I was raised in Iowa by parents that had a small business in the farming industry. They instilled in me a work ethic and an understanding of how government can work for the betterment of a rural community. This was furthered when I worked for the State Extension Service and at a civil engineering firm serving small towns. As an engineer with an MBA, I led large teams at AT&T to understand complex problems, and more importantly, to solve them. If a new challenge arose, give it to Judy, she'll get it done. As a senior manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, I also recruited and motivated talented consultants, similar to our city staff. Half of my career was focused in finance, prioritizing capital expenditures, attaining significant cost savings. I'd like to bring my business experience to our city government. I've also given over 30 years of community service. I've worked on boards raising funds for numerous local charities, including the Friends of the Milton Library, our Milton First Responders, teen suicide prevention, canine assistance, food insecure families, and for Harvard Business School's program scholarships for area charity leaders. Like most of you, I worked very hard, saved early, and invested wisely so I can now live in Milton. Now that I am semi-retired, I am ready to use my broad business experience to benefit you, the citizens of Milton. My extensive charity work has helped me to understand many different perspectives. I have enjoyed spending time with many of you, listening to your concerns, asking questions, engaging in discussions on solutions. I hope to serve you on the Milton City Council.
Thank you, candidates. We'll start with Mr. Moore. Why are you running?
Actually, my first question goes to Ms. Burds, doesn't it?
It's going to go to you.
Okay.
Why are you running for Milton City Council?
Thanks, Joe. It's a great question. I've been serving the community for 21 years, actively participating in careful land planning in Milton, and then, of course, for the last 13 years as Mayor Joe Lockwood's appointee to the Planning Commission. This is a time when it's going to be important to have careful land planning for Milton, to adhere strictly to the comprehensive land use plan. The kinds of pressures we're going to be under because we're a popular place to live, it's going to be important to have dedicated leadership who has been tested. I've stood for the things that Milton's been a part of. I've helped to create the things that we enjoyed today. And I think that that kind of leadership that's been tested and proven that I can stand up against sewer extension, I can stand up against high density. I've got countless examples I can give you, and we'll hopefully get to some of those things over the course of the evening. But it's that kind of experience that will allow me to start on day one on City Council to make a contribution for the long term. And I look forward to serving the community.
Thank you, Ms. Burds.
I decided to run because my friends thought I would be good at listening to what people needed, at researching, at investigating, and using my good business judgment to apply it for the benefit of the city of Milton. I have the time. I've been a very busy career woman for most of my life. I feel I have the talent, and I feel I can bring a fresh perspective to represent you on Milton City Council.
Thank you.
So I have 30 seconds.
Yes.
So this is going to, the difference that you're going to find this evening is really going to be about experience. 21 years of community advocacy, even before we became a city, 13 years of tried and tested on the Planning Commission. I've engaged far beyond that. There isn't a corridor meeting that's taken place in Crabapple, Deerfield, or Birmingham Crossroads that I've not attended. It's a chance to engage the small community, and I've been there listening to the concerns of small business, as well as the voice of the citizens of Milton, and look forward to representing them all.
Ms. Burds?
I also felt compelled to run because I felt Milton needed an independent, fresh voice to bring some new perspectives, to listen and respect the opinions of the citizens of Milton, which I've so enjoyed getting to know even better, and to use some of the things that I have learned as I have grown and attended a number of Milton City Council meetings, as well as spoken at many of them.
Thank you. And for Ms. Burds, what is a decision taken by the City Council in recent years that you disagree with, and why?
So probably most recently, the decision that I disagreed with, and I actually spoke at the council meetings before that, was to raise the tax millage rate all the way to the maximum. I spoke out about this at that. I felt that better work could have been done to truly understand the budget initiatives, to evaluate those, and to look at the funding that was required before just raising the tax rate to the max and then figuring out the funding later. I also pointed out that there were alternative sources of revenue, that one of the things that needed to be done were some park improvements, and those could have been funded with a sliver and a small percentage of the green space bond, but I had to be the one that dug into that and found that and revealed it to the City Council.
All right, Mr. Moore?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, what is a decision taken by the City Council in recent years that you disagree with, and why?
Okay, thank you. I think one of the decisions that they made a couple years ago actually had to do with removing some transparency from some of the decision-making before the community. It has to do with major plats and minor plats, larger land development versus small land development. What they removed was actually the voice of the Planning Commission in the process on the small plat development. And in doing so, it removed a careful measure that the Planning Commission used to give for transparency to the community. That transparency meant that we weren't seeing it. And in the course of that also went away the ability for the Planning Commission to measure or to weigh in on the fact that without any consideration that they could actually remove the buffer that's a part of the rural viewshed. So I think it's important to return that transparency by allowing the Planning Commission to weigh in on both large plat and minor plat decisions.
Ms. Burds?
I have no rebuttal.
Mr. Moore? Okay, all right. And now for Ms. Burds, what steps would, excuse me, this is Paul's question, correct? My apologies.
That's all right.
Mr. Moore, what steps would you take to best protect Milton's rural character?
Thanks, Joe. Good question. I think it's strict adherence to the comprehensive land use plan. That makes sure that Milton is developed by our plan. It doesn't allow happenstance development. The comprehensive land use plan is the best guide that we've got. It ensures that Milton stays rural, where the residential development is supposed to take place, and it allows our commercial development to take place by definition there as well. Without the strict adherence to the comprehensive plan, you engage in conversations about sewer extension, overdevelopment, and things that have not been a part of what our vision is. So I would propose that we strictly adhere to the comprehensive land use plan. I would propose that we also take a look at making sure that we maximize our expenditures on the green space bond. We've got $7 million remaining. It's important that we spend that money carefully to ensure that the rural Milton, with the 500 acres that we've already bought, is part of a continued preservation of the Milton that we know and love.
Ms. Burds?
The land use plan is set in place through ordinances and overlays that are in the Muni Code of the City of Milton. This can take a lot to learn. I think I've read sections of it, particularly section 20 and 64, where a lot of this is codified 6 times. What tends to diverge us from the land use plans, however, are variances. Variances tend to be those votes that are taken by the Planning Commission with a recommendation or by the City Council to look at what the rights are, but perhaps take the rights from one person and give them to another. Or sometimes the variances may take us away from that plan. So I think we need to really carefully evaluate any variances and make sure they meet the 4-part test, legal test, before they are approved.
Mr. Moore, 30 seconds.
Thanks, Joe. I think it's important, too, that we abide by the comprehensive land use plan. That's going to be a big point of difference in our ability to make a contribution. Where Judy has suggested she's read the comprehensive land use plan and is beginning to comprehend it, I've actually helped twice to write the comprehensive land use plan. So I'm intimate with the plan and what it's supposed to allow and protect for Milton. There are variances that have to be given careful consideration from time to time that are practical and actually do address landowner rights that I'm a big advocate for.
Ms. Burds?
Great. One of the things in reading these is looking at the overlays. The overlays often describe what we want an area to look like and to be like. And there are some great aspirational statements in those overlays. I think we need to be more proactive, however, in helping to achieve some of those looks, feels, and the whole goal that was set out in the land use plans. There's some great plans there. I think we need to be more proactive as a council in making those a reality.
I have a follow-up question about the equestrian community here in Milton. If you were to be elected, what steps would you take to ensure that the horses are protected from the continued development and other encroachments that may occur because of that? We'll start with Mr. Moore.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think it's important that we actually do develop an equestrian overlay. I think that's been an oversight in our city so far. I think it's important that we do take into careful consideration the fact that there's a lot of pressure on our horse community today by the change in the tax digest that was done to us by Fulton County. Fulton County has put a heavy pressure on our large landowners, and a lot of those are equestrian estates. And it's important that we make sure that those folks who are now, in many cases, becoming land poor because of Fulton County's tax digest change are given consideration for how we can best serve them.
Okay. Ms. Burds?
Our horses are a valuable and appreciated part of Milton. They take a lot of hard work. I had horses when I was growing up. I remember spending more time working than I did riding. The key thing, though, is to support these people because it also takes a lot of money. And so we really need to look at the taxes. One of the things that I was proactive in doing last year was in looking at preventing some of the fireworks and loud noises that were disrupting some of the horses.
Ms. Burds, question that has been posed by some members of the community: is Milton becoming just another Alpharetta or Roswell? If yes, why? And if no, why not?
I lived in Roswell before I moved to Milton, and I moved here to be able to enjoy some of the benefits of our open space. The advantage we have is our 1-acre lots in many of the more rural areas, which many of those of you in the audience that I see live. This really helps to benefit as well as serve our community and keep it from becoming another Alpharetta. The other thing I think is an advantage is we have specific commercial zones and the development in there. I do think we can do more to add more businesses to those businesses that are there and to attract more businesses in those areas, but to keep them within their commercial zones.
Mr. Moore?
I don't think we're becoming another Alpharetta or Roswell. We're doing the things with our careful land planning to ensure that we don't. I'm personally looking at ways to try to work with the development community to make sure that if some of our precious land does fall to development, that we encourage those developers to work on larger land lot preservation. For example, with some relief to the infrastructure, oftentimes just the relief from the wide roads and curb and gutter can be enough to change the return on investment where their yield does not have to be as significant. And it may actually turn those 1 acre lots into 2 acres or 3 acres, thus putting less children in our schools, less cars on our streets, and less pressure on our infrastructure. I also believe that our tree ordinance sets us apart. I actually sit on the tree ordinance committee, and we're working on that right now to make sure that it is less, to be honest, less developer friendly and more landowner friendly, so that the common landowner today can make sure his land rights are protected and take that tree down if he needs to, with the careful supervision of our city arborist.
Ms. Burds, 30 seconds.
I'm also encouraged with some of the large land lots that are being developed out near me. The benefit to that is, or the need to achieve that, though, is to have our staff be able to help encourage those developers and work with them to build to the land and get those larger lots. I think the tree ordinance is long overdue. It's been in committee for over 3 years, and that would be a priority for me to get that finished and in place.
Mr. Moore?
Actually, the tree ordinance has been worked on. We've had a tree ordinance that's protected us to this point in time that's served us pretty well. But it was time for a review to move from a density-based tree ordinance to a canopy-based, and that's going to serve us very well. That kind of careful iteration to make sure that it is respectful of the development community, but also more importantly, the private landowner is going to be important to us. And I think it's important that we set ourselves apart from the surrounding communities in just that way.
Mr. Moore, what changes would you implement to ease traffic woes in North Milton, particularly excessive cut-through commuters, excessive speeding, and aggressive drivers?
It's one of our biggest pressures we've got. There is, to a certain extent, uncontrolled development in our two nearby communities, both in Cherokee and in Forsyth. And we're becoming a pass-through community. So I was an early advocate for the roundabouts that have been introduced to Milton. I used to bang heads with Carter Lucas when he was our director of public works. And he eventually, not that I alone did that, there were certainly a lot of us who were representing that voice for Milton, but I think the roundabouts has been a wonderful solution for that. I think it's important that we take a hard look, and it's actually in the budget this year, for a review of a citywide speed limit. We know that the Forsyth and Cherokee speed limits are 35 and 30 surrounding us. You get to Milton and our speed limit is 45, which oftentimes means 55. It's important that we look at a citywide traffic calming effort, which has to do with speeds first and enforcement. And I think that will make a big difference in the kind of commuter traffic that we see when they begin to find somewhere else to go than straight through Milton.
Ms. Burds?
Great. Traffic pass-through. GDOT is currently planning a lot of changes to the area surrounding us. The widening of State Highway 20 to the north of us, the widening of Highway 9 from the county line all the way down, as well as some other plans in our area. We need to be better liaisoning, that's not even a word. We need to work more with GDOT and try to understand their plans and what ripple effect it will have on Milton. I think we can work with them to try to get the traffic from Cherokee County to stay in Cherokee County to its destination. Regarding the aggressive drivers, I think we could do a better job of communication, of enforcement, of encouragement of people to be respectful and be Milton nice.
Mr. Moore, 30 seconds.
I don't have a rebuttal.
Ms. Burds, if elected, you will serve as one of 7 votes on all issues. In what way do you feel your presence on the City Council will impact the efficiency, development, and character of Milton?
As an engineer with an MBA, I bring a different perspective. One of those perspectives is to question things. The people that have worked with me on various committees, who have worked with me in business, know that I like to ask questions. I like to seek to understand the issues and try to find better solutions. When I worked at AT&T, questions were openly encouraged and often found a much better solution. I think asking the questions also allows council to reveal their thinking and their decision-making, to be more transparent. And so I would work there not to be disagreeable, but really to seek better solutions.
Mr. Moore?
I've demonstrated for 13 years my ability to show leadership on the Planning Commission. There's oftentimes that there isn't consensus on the Planning Commission, and we vet a case that's come before us. And it's all about listening carefully, which I've demonstrated that I can do, and then consensus build to the point where we've reached good decisions to be able to push those recommendations forward to the mayor and council. I'll bring that same leadership to the council. I've asked good questions, I've engaged the community for 21 years, 13 years on the Planning Commission, and it's that continued effort that I'll make, whether it's a small business owner, somebody in the neighborhood, somebody in an open road neighborhood. I've engaged those people and will continue to do so. So my strong advocacy for the voice of Milton will continue, and the leadership that I've shown with my success on the Planning Commission will allow me to do the job on day one.
Do you have any follow-up?
One of the things that I really have enjoyed is listening to the citizens. They have a lot of great ideas. I think as council, we can do a better job of listening and respecting the opinions of the members of the city of Milton and bring their ideas to bear to join with ours on council to come up with the future of the city of Milton.
I think Milton does a great job of listening. I think our current seated council members and the mayor are spectacular at that. And there have been several evenings that we've gone well into the night because our mayor has given careful consideration to all the voice of Milton, where we've let everyone who has come speak far beyond what the, oftentimes the meeting decorum might have suggested. But as such, I look forward to being just that same kind of council member. While I'll have an open ear as I have in the past, I'll carry that same open ear to the council.
Mr. Moore, Milton has recently added additional fire and police personnel, but according to a budget report, the city could be better served by 2 additional patrol officers. Do you feel the current level of service is sufficient for fire and police? If yes, why? If no, why not?
Yeah, budgeting is always going to be a difficult process to measure whether we are providing the right services or not. I mean, I'm a person who believes that we are properly staffed today. Our response times are tremendous. My wife and I were a victim of a crime 2 years ago. The response time was incredible. Not only were we served well by the response time, but by the depth of their investigation on the incident that we had at home. And they actually solved the crime. Thanks to Detective Bradshaw, they caught those criminals up in Baltimore. I think we've got a tremendous police and fire service. There was an incident as recently as yesterday in my neighborhood. The response that the neighborhood gave me, or the neighbor who had the incident, was, it was amazing. They were here within minutes. So I think we're actually well served today. It's always going to be important to continue to measure our opportunity for continued improvement, but I think we're well served today.
I take great pride in the fire and police that we have serving the city of Milton and have enjoyed working with them on different problem-solving opportunities. Regarding the fire and police, though, I think we need to trust when they tell us that they need more, that they're looking at the data. Ask questions, but trust when they say they have response times. While Mr. Moore has had great response times, in our neighborhoods, we've had situations where it has taken 30 or 45 minutes to respond. Some of that might be staffing, some of that might be load. But I think we really have to listen and trust both the police and fire as well as our city manager, who was the former head of police, when they say that they need more staff.
I don't have a vote.
Okay. Ms. Burds, the city has continued to purchase passive parks through its green space bond, but still lacks significant active park spaces. Would you consider adding active park space a priority?
I do consider adding active park space a priority, but I think we should bring the parks to the people. I think we need to look at park space that is closer to where our population centers are and provide them with a place that they can call a village center where they can gather. So rather than having the people go to the parks, let's look at bringing the parks to the people. I also think we need to look at some scheduling tools or some things regarding Bell Memorial Park to get that better utilized. Sometimes it's very heavily utilized, other times it is not. I also think we need to treat our space as very precious and look at ways that we can maximize the use of that space rather than add more space, maybe look at multiple purposes that that space can be used for.
Mike, would you read the question again, please?
Sure. The city has continued to purchase passive parks through its green space bond, but still lacks significant active park spaces. Would you consider adding active park space to be a priority?
Great, thank you. Yes, absolutely. I lived here for 22 years, and the only park expansion that we've had in that period of time has been the expansion of Bell Memorial Park. That's served us well with some first-class, state-of-the-art facilities. But beyond that, and it wasn't until the green space bond that we actually bought a little bit of active space. It's not green space bond money that was used for it, but with the acquisition of the Milton Country Club, we picked up a swimming pool and some tennis courts. But other than that, until 2 weeks ago, that was the only additional land that we acquired. 2 weeks ago, the city spent committed to spending $1.5 million on the additional soccer fields and lacrosse fields at Cox and Arnold Mill. That's a tremendous purchase. You're not interrupting the community's life. The lights are already there, the fields are already there. It was a private entity. That's a smart purchase. We're not interrupting people's lives by introducing something new. So I would be an advocate for a couple more ball fields. I think we are underserved. Our kids are playing way too far into the evening, and I support active space acquisition.
Any rebuttal?
I'm also pleased to see that the city has been able to get Providence Park open and use it a little bit closer to the people for their ability. I want to encourage, though, the city to look at multi-use fields that can be used for a variety of purposes. Some of that could be done, for example, by putting a baseball field with the outfield shared with a rectangular field. A little more work on the scheduling, but something that can take better use of the land we have available closer to where the population centers are.
All right, next question is from Mr. Moore. As a council member, how do you plan to balance the rights of landowners who want to subdivide their property while also retaining Milton's rural residential areas?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
How do you plan to balance the rights of landowners who want to subdivide their property while retaining Milton's rural residential areas?
Oh, thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Yeah, landowner rights are very important. And as we know, with the Fulton County Tax Digest change, there are a lot of folks who are, because of that, have become land poor. I think it's really important that we embrace the fact that we're going to have to engage as a city to make sure that nothing less than 1 acre lots are maintained. By right, they can develop 1 acre lots. So it's an encouragement of a different kind of infrastructure change for the development community. If it's going to fall to development, I'm going to suggest that we look at infrastructure improvements. If you think about North Valley, one of the best examples we've got in our city with no curb and gutter. We can actually manage water by swale. We can reduce the width of the roads as well, which is also traffic calming in and of itself. That kind of change can change the yield that a developer needs to get, and actually, instead of being 1 acre lots, could be 2 or even 3. So I'm going to encourage that kind of engagement with the development community. So if it does fall to development, that we plan it very carefully.
I also understand that landowners have rights, and the right to develop being one of them. I want to see if we can do more to encourage larger lot development, either through our infrastructure, as Paul has alluded to, and also our city staff, helping to work with them. I'm encouraged that the last 2 developments in North Milton have been on land that could have had 18 houses on them. Instead, they have 7 and 8. There's a demand for larger estates.
Rebuttal?
Sure.
I think it's going to be important that we do engage not only the landowners but the development community. The development community is going to be the ones that we're working with to make those changes. I've discussed the idea of actually introducing more gravel roads to Milton. There are a couple of developers that would love to take what are large tracts of land today that we know at some point will fall to development and introduce gravel road solutions. Well, gravel road solutions means a minimum of 3 acres. That's the requirement in Milton for development along a gravel road.
Ms. Bird, some say there has been a lot of leniency on the part of the City Council to enforce penalties to those individuals or businesses that aren't complying with ordinances or permitting, et cetera. What is your stance on how these offenses should be handled? And can you give us an example of when you may have dealt with something similar?
We have laws in the city of Milton. I believe they should be upheld. I also believe, though, that in some cases a warning is what's a good first step so that people understand what it is they shouldn't do. But they also should be made to comply. I'm trying to think of one example. One example was not too far from me where someone had put a fence in the right-of-way and so was asked then to move the fence, but instead requested a variance. That variance was denied, and so I hope that shortly that fence will be removed from the right-of-way.
I agree. Upholding our ordinances is going to be important, and violations need to be addressed. We tend to be Milton friendly. I think, as Judy had suggested earlier, the Milton friendly is a catchphrase that I think also introduces a softness when it comes to code enforcement. I think it's going to be important that we do raise that level. I think education is going to be an important part of that. Engaging them first and foremost to suggest that they need to take a hard look at what it was that's in violation and give them a chance to improve that. Short of allowing that to happen, they can certainly approach the city for a request for a variance. That's what the Planning Commission does. We hear variances and we take those under very careful consideration. They have to meet strict compliance to the 4 pillars of decision-making to make sure that they are given worthy consideration as to whether a variance should be granted. And so I've dealt with countless experiences with that.
I do have a follow-up to that. Do you have any ideas of your own about maybe some ordinance changes that might shore up something that might be lax in the ordinance in terms of permitting or things of that nature?
One of the things that I have seen is that there are certain ordinances where it doesn't say what the penalty is, or it doesn't say how long a person has to remedy it. So as we're going through and cleaning up the code, I think we need to look at that so we make sure that it's understood by all as to what are the appropriate actions that should be taken if a violation is seen. Sometimes, though, people just don't know. And so I think the first thing to do is to inform, and then the next thing to do is to enforce.
I think one of the best examples where we need some shoring up of the ordinance is actually the tree ordinance. The tree ordinance had served us pretty well for a number of years, but it was recognized that the development community was probably better served by that. They were allowed to take down more trees than I think that the community was comfortable with. When you begin to see red dirt more often than you'd like, it's important that we take a hard look at that. What we discovered in the more recent review that was given to a second independent stakeholder group that was in many cases represented by the development community, there was a strong push for them to have less responsibility for preserving some of our trees, in particular heritage trees. So I'm working hard as a strong voice in the tree ordinance in particular to ensure that not only do we have a shoring up of what the developers can do, but some hard penalties for the removal of trees to make them really think hard about taking down a heritage tree or some significant specimen trees.
All right, Mr. Moore, what is your stance on the increased millage rate that the City Council recently passed?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's a good question. It's produced a lot of debate in the community. Actually, I wouldn't call it an increase. I would call it a return to the millage rate. The return to the millage rate has allowed us to go back to a careful budgeting that the city was first founded on. If you think back to the days 13 years ago when the city was created, there were oftentimes people said that we weren't going to be self-sustaining with 85% residential, only 15% commercial. So that return to the millage rate is an important change to ensure that our budget is one that addresses all the concerns of Milton. As a young community, only 13 years old, with the expectations of services like cities that have been around a lot longer than we have, that millage rate change, or not, the return to the millage rate, puts $675,000 back into the budget. That allows us to make sure our roads are being paved. That allows us to take a look at land acquisition. It allows us to look at active parks, and things that are requested by the community that otherwise we wouldn't be able to afford.
Ms. Burds?
I guess I can repeat what I said when I went to council on 2 occasions regarding the millage rate. I actually asked council to be very careful in their review of the initiatives, of the funding. I was a little disappointed to hear that the city council had just really had a thorough review just 3 and 4 days before the actual vote. I really feel that city council, and I hope to lead this when I'm on it, needs to set the priorities earlier, needs to review the initiatives, and do that before setting the tax rate. As I was in the audience trying to quickly look at some of the initiatives, I could see there was a little padding there and a little padding there, and really felt that they didn't have to go to the max, that they could have gone to something that would still allow us to do a lot of the things that we want to have done and had a priority to have done without just automatically taking it to the max.
Mr. Moore?
I was in a community last night, and one of the things they were talking about was what else can we do? How can we better pave our roads? How can we produce better infrastructure? How can we better serve the community with police response and fire? You can't do those things unless you have those items in the budget and the dollars to expend to support those things. So it's a careful balance of making sure that we don't put a burden on the community with taxes, but in this case, it's a return to the millage rate that the city was founded on. That was done very carefully and carefully planned. It's important that we support the millage rate.
Ms. Burds?
I guess I'll just say again that I think the way budgeting should be done, you set priorities, you look at it, you look at areas, you prioritize things. Perhaps you might say, gee, now I could, maybe if I had this millage rate, I could do something more. But what I heard from council and what I observed as I dug into the 220-page budget was that there was opportunities to cut some costs and still do everything we wanted to do.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So, Mr. Moore, do you think that the city should continue its pay-as-you-go system? And what are the benefits or perhaps negatives to that system?
Actually, I think we should continue that, Joe, and it's a great question. It's one of the things that's allowed our city, unlike so many others, to ensure that we can afford ourselves. We only buy what we can pay for. It's almost like having a home checkbook. If you want to buy the car, you don't, and we're not a city that's going to take on debt. You have to take a careful look at how we're going to afford that. So that's, when you look at the fact that we built our city hall with no debt, we're building our current public safety structure as well with the new fire department and the courthouse. We're paying cash for that. We're paying cash for the parkland. So that's an endorsement of the fact that we're doing it right. The last thing we want to do is to look at other ways, which might mean increasing taxes. That's not what we're going to be about. Our millage rates is capped, so we're not going to raise taxes. It allows us to ensure that we can afford the things, and the best way to do that is the pay-go system.
Ms. Burds?
I agree with the pay-as-you-go system and the need for a balanced budget, but I'm a little puzzled because we just refinanced $25 million in revenue bonds. So we do have some bonds out there. The good news is we've got a very, very good advisor that has helped us find a very, very good interest rate. Probably interest rates are the lowest you'll see right now, but we thought that a couple of years ago. So we do have some bonds out there, but I think the city is managing that debt financing well.
Thank you. And Ms. Burds, how do you plan to attract businesses to grow the city's limited commercial tax base while ensuring those companies fit with the city's character and are also sustainable?
Right. Our largest area for commercial development is in the Deerfield and Highway 9 corridor. There is available commercial space there. I believe there's also the ability to expand the amount of business that some of those businesses are receiving. Unfortunately, that area was really developed in the 1990s. Some of it needs some revitalization. Businesses want to go at places that are vibrant. So I think the next priority for the city, now that it has focused on and revitalized the crabapple area, is to really focus on the revitalization of Deerfield, and by doing so, work to attract better businesses and more businesses for the businesses that are there.
Mr. Moore?
Would you repeat the question, please, Joe?
Yes, how do you plan to attract business to grow the city's limited commercial tax base while ensuring that those businesses fit with the city's character and are sustainable?
Great, thanks, Joe. I don't know that it's the city's job to determine what businesses come here, other than to make sure that they're consistent with the look and feel of Milton. It's not our charge to decide what goes into the buildings. Of course, the economic development that is happening in Milton is creating this great sense of place. We're becoming a popular place to live. The demands for services and goods that are here in Milton are going to create that sense of urgency for those businesses to come here. So of course I endorse that. I've engaged with the local in the corridor meetings. I've actually attended all of them for Deerfield, Crabapple, and Birmingham. And in those small business meetings, they've suggested that the city marketing itself as a place to come live, work, and play is a great way to expand our business, our business cornerstone, and I look forward to continue to support that.
Ms. Burds?
I do feel if you have an attractive place that you can attract business, and the city can do a lot to help with developing that infrastructure and developing that sense of place that will be of demand. Our economic development manager also has helped to work with businesses. I know I toured her around one of our commercial areas to give her a sense of what we appreciated in that area and what we also thought could be attracted to that area.
Ms. Moore?
I think Sarah Ledart, our business development manager, is doing a great job. She's got some wonderful creative ideas. The Meet Me in Milton is a great example for that. We had the first event this last week, and unfortunately the rain put a bit of a damper on the outing. But it was a great way to say, not just come to Milton, but as that program evolves, come and meet me in all of Milton. There will be programs in Deerfield, Crabapple, and Birmingham once that program is fully off the ground. It's that kind of exciting programs that will bring more business to Milton.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Moore, what do you see as the most important immediate and long-term challenges facing Milton, and what top actions would you take to address each?
Growth is going to be our biggest challenge. We're a popular place to live, and everybody wants to move here. Not everybody has a place to, let me say it differently. It's going to be the strict adherence to our comprehensive land use plan, because that is going to make sure that we keep that balance of commercial and residential growth. Because everybody wants to be here, because we're a popular place to live, that demand is not going to be any greater than we're experiencing right now. That adherence to the comprehensive land use plan makes sure that our rural part stays rural, our commercial part stays commercial. And that balance is going to be important. I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Ms. Burds?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, what do you see as the most important immediate and long-term challenges facing Milton, and what top actions would you take to address each?
So I think our most important long-term is getting ahead of some of the traffic planning. I've mentioned this before. GDOT has plans to widen State Highway 20. They have plans to widen Highway 9. We have new access lanes for the fast access to 400 coming. Those decisions will have ripple effects on the city of Milton and its traffic. Roads are not something that can be built overnight. We need to get ahead of that, so it becomes kind of a now, even though it's a long term, because we need to be working to understand and try to influence that so that we don't have created traffic problems because we weren't ready for them, or we don't develop roads that are not going to be that heavily trafficked because some of that will shift. So getting ahead of the traffic now with better planning, I think, is something we can do to address that.
Some more?
Yeah, I think my advocacy for roundabouts has been can and will be a big part of our traffic solution. We've placed several within the city today that have been highly successful. It's moving traffic in a calm and orderly fashion, and it's also allowing that pass-through traffic to make sure that it moves through as well. We're not sitting in queue for long periods of time. I think a couple of additional strategically placed roundabouts and a couple of additional strategically placed right-hand and left-hand turn lanes will accommodate the traffic to make sure that we address those things going forward.
Yep.
Ms. Burds?
Well, I think the roundabouts have been an excellent addition, both for traffic as well as, more importantly, traffic safety. There was one intersection I would never drive through because it was such a accident. I think it is a part of the solution. It is not all the solution. I think a lot of those have been identified. Some of them are being funded with T-SPLOST funds. We need to complete that, but I'm actually thinking a little longer term on what the traffic effects and ripple effects could be.
Ms. Burds, included in the former Milton Country Club property master plan is the all-inclusive playground being funded by children's charities. Though they support the playground being in Milton, many residents associated with the city's swim program spoke against the playground being located on the site because it could interfere with swim meets. In your tenure, the ultimate decision of where that park goes and if it is in that former Milton Country Club property, should the playground be located at that park or should the city secure another location?
The charity that raised the funds for that, the Children's Charity Group, has done a fabulous job in raising the funds for that playground. I've looked at it very carefully. I've also looked at the priorities for what is needed in the city based on that. One of the things that is planned for the former Milton Country Club is a sand volleyball court. It is a lower priority in the list of park priorities than the all-inclusive playground. We've looked at other locations. I think it would be a good match. I think we might have to find another location for the sand volleyball court, but I actually support it going into the former Milton Country Club.
Mr. Moore?
I too applaud the efforts of the children's charity to raise the funds for that. It's going to be a wonderful amenity, not just for Milton, but it's intended to be a regional draw as well. So I think parking is going to be an issue that needs to be addressed there. It's not that the playground can't go there, because I think they've been carefully measuring the space, and I think there is sufficient space for it today. But to look at it for long term, I think it's going to be important that we measure their future plans as well. It will be sufficient for today to put it there, along with the pressure that we take off of the parking once the south end of the green space is open in the Milton Country Club. The city just is making an offer on the Kennedy property, and with the parking that may come there for the green space use, that will take some pressure off of the parking and actually make it more usable, for the children's charity space. The space today is sufficient, but I think long-term we're going to have to take a hard look at whether all of it can be accommodated there.
Ms. Burds?
I'll pick it up from here. Question about the equestrian community, and this is directed to Ms. Burds. Do you feel as though the current ordinances on the books in Milton are enough to protect horses from abuses or other encroachments on their pastures, or do you feel like the city could pass more restrictive ordinances to protect them in the future?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier about the work on the fireworks. The city of Milton has as much restriction on fireworks as state law will allow. I actually reached out to a member of of our State House to try to explore and understand what more could we do, because often the fireworks and the noises more importantly, the noises they create become a concern for the equestrian community. We actually brainstormed and thought, guess what? We could maybe get the HOAs to look at better communications, perhaps better restrictions, and in helping to enforce some of those fireworks laws so that, and the noise that comes from them to help our equestrian committee. The other thing we need to look at too as we plan our roundabouts is, can the horse trailers get around them? So there's a lot of consideration that we need to give and should give to preserve our equestrian community.
Mr. Moore?
Mike, would you read the question again, please?
Sure. The question is the city doing enough to protect the horses? And do you feel as though there could be more of an ordinance on the books in the city to protect them?
Great, thanks, Mike. I do believe our city does a good job of protecting our horses. I think Judy points out an important part of that, which is outside of our control with the firework containment. That is a state level controlled or law, I guess, and Milton does have the highest level of cooperation at the state level with our firework concerns as well. I do believe, because the equestrian community is important to us, that we should continue an ongoing conversation, not just with the equestrian community, but with actually the equestrian landowners themselves. They do a great job, the equestrian community does a great job of representing them, but I think it's going to be important that we continue that dialogue in an even wider spectrum to ensure that we've engaged all their concerns. I think we are well protected today, but I'm always open to new ideas and suggestions from the equestrian community.
Any rebuttal?
One of the other things that I think we need to look at to protect our equestrian community is just the cost of maintaining horses. It's expensive. It's a lot of work. And so looking at ways that we can perhaps incent them to keep their large lots and to keep their equestrian community and horses would be of benefit to us all.
I think I'll stay.
Okay.
Thank you.
This question came in from the constituents, and it's directed at Mr. Moore, and we'll allow Ms. Burds to react to it and give her opinion as well. Question is, given your regular patronage of Matilda's, why did you preside over the May 2018 Planning Commission meeting in which Matilda's was discussed and voted on before it went to City Council? The question is, do you not view that as a conflict of interest, and should you have recused yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's a great question, and I can certainly understand how the community may have some concern over that. I would liken it to, I'm a patron of Publix. I'm a patron of Carl Black, GMC. I'm a patron of other businesses in Milton as well. It's a small business that I'd like to see successful here. So patronage does not introduce any personal gain for me. One of the measures for recusing yourself is whether you receive any personal gain. I received none other than the fact that I'm a patron and enjoy the music. I think that Matilda's has a great value for Milton, and as such, I was an advocate for bringing small business like that here. We didn't have a cultural experience like that in Milton. So the introduction of a small listening venue is appropriate. It's brought economic vitality to the four corners of Birmingham Crossroads that I'm very concerned about, and I think all the small businesses at the Birmingham Crossroads would tell you they can mark their calendar the day that Matilda started their business there.
Okay. Ms. Burds, your reaction to how he handled it and how you would have handled it?
I attended that planning commission meeting, and it was one of those things that I was quite surprised at how it was handled. I had gone to the planning commission meeting hoping to see a review of the variances. There were 9 requested, to see questioning as to why they were all needed. I think there was one that was passed that probably was not needed. Some due diligence on the why, some questioning to see if the 4 tests for meeting the variances were done. And I was a bit disappointed that I did not see that out of the commission that night. I don't know what the motivation was. I know there was a lot of enthusiasm from Mr. Moore and from members of the council to see Matilda's go in, but I think better due diligence could have been done in that meeting and would have liked to have seen it.
That's a meeting that went well into the evening. I think due diligence was actually one of our finer moments in the measure of whether Matilda's was appropriate and whether the variances were appropriate as well. There were 9 variances that night. 6 of them had to do with the fact that we don't have a music venue ordinance. We were putting a square peg into a round hole, and the fact that staff brought before us an ordinance that had dealt with festivals. So 6 of those 9 dealt with the fact that we had to overcome a festival ordinance to address a music venue.
Right. I was actually referring to the planning commission meeting that didn't go that late, but I think in retrospect, if we could have taken the time to get the ordinance right, recognizing we didn't have one that really fit, to determine what was the appropriate ordinance, would have been a more suitable approach as well.
Ms. Burds, at a recent city council meeting, you suggested the city could use green space bond funds to pay for some of the millions of dollars that are called for in park improvements and the city's trails plan. Do you still believe the city should put those funds toward improvements rather than additional land preservation?
Thank you. My proposal actually for using that for park improvements was not to use all the remaining funds, but to perhaps look at using a sliver of the funds. We recognize that at some point you get to the point that land costs so much, especially the appropriateness, and perhaps setting aside some of those funds that could be used for improvements as called for in the referendum that we voted on, rather than 100% only being used for the land. I also felt too that there was a lot of discussion that it was only to be used for land purchases. If the council was going to decide that was the case, they should have been more revealing in that was a decision they took, as opposed to trying to say, oh, no, that's all it was supposed to be used for. So if they wanted to choose to do that, fine, but be upfront about it.
Mr. Moore?
I think it's important to use every last dollar of that bond fund to buy green space. This is our one shot to do that. Land that's available today may not be available tomorrow. Land that's available today at the price available today is only going to get more expensive. So it's going to be critical that we maximize those dollars and make sure that we capitalize on the land that's available. There's some terrific purchases today. We bought over 500 acres of land today. I think it's important that we use those last dollars, the $7 million remaining, to make sure that the strategic purchases that are left are going to continue to create connectivity, a sense of place in Milton. That's a part of what is going to make sure that Milton stays Milton, is the acquisition of that. There's plenty of time to work on the infrastructure in the coming months and years with the new dollars that will come from new budgets.
Follow-up question for you both. Your thoughts on eminent domain, when it should be used, and how?
So go to me first.
Ms. Burds.
Didn't I get the last question first on green space?
This is the follow-up.
Oh, it's a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
The city has taken great care to try to avoid using eminent domain, to try to negotiate with people, to try to look at alternatives. I believe that's the right direction. I don't think it's come to a head yet that we've had to look at a situation and enforce eminent domain. In recent history, it might have been much earlier, but I would try to avoid it if at all possible, and try to work out a solution to meet our needs as well as preserve the rights of that individual who may not want to sell their land.
And I agree. I think eminent domain should always be the last path to make change when the landowner is not necessarily a willing participant. We've not had to exercise it so far in the city. There is one I know that the city is actually contemplating at this point. That would be the first time that we ever did that. It's land that has fallen into disrepair. The landowner no longer lives here. It has been a transient community living in the home. I think that there's some careful consideration that should be given for that. That land is also happens to be in an area where we need it's a vital roundabout to ensure additional safety. It's at a crossroads that we've had a number of accidents, so I think the roundabout is going to be important that we go there, that it go there. I think it's important that we find a way with negotiation to avoid eminent domain, but I do believe that in that particular instance, if that's what it falls to, it should be our last resort.
Okay, we've come to our final question of the evening.
Everybody applaud.
Nobody's fallen asleep yet. Okay. The question is for Mr. Moore. What, in your opinion, still needs to be accomplished in the city of Milton for the city to completely establish itself?
Thanks, Mike. That's a great question. I think that where we've placed City Hall in our Crabapple district is going to be a great answer for ensuring that we have that sense of place that we can call home, and there's a sense of identity that comes along with that. The introduction of form-based code has allowed us to do that. It is introducing a sense of place and bringing a business vitality that we haven't known before. It's allowed us to hold events there where people can say, I know where Crabapple is, and it's on the map from that standpoint. So I think an endorsement of that sense of place that comes from the development of Crabapple is going to help create that. I think that ongoing beyond that is going to be the shoring up of some of our ordinances that still need to make sure that we provide that look and feel in place in Milton. That's the completion of the trails plan as well. The connectivity that's going to be important to finish out a connected community where we can have a live, work, play, walk, and active lifestyle.
Ms. Burds?
We can almost read on his face when he's ready to call time. I think I mentioned this earlier. What needs to be accomplished is that some of the revitalization and expansion and beautification of the Crabapple area, the completion of that area needs to be brought to bear in the Deerfield Highway 9 area. I believe that bringing vitality to that area will help address a sense of place, will attract better businesses, and attract more business to the existing businesses.
All right, follow-up.
Do you have a follow-up? No, okay. All right, we are going to move into the closing statements portion of the evening, and since, Mr. Moore, you are candidate A, you get to go first for 2 minutes.
Great, thanks, Mike. I'd like to thank everyone again for being here tonight. An educated voter serves our community well. And thank you to our moderators and to St. Aidan's for hosting us this evening. I believe there is a significant difference in the candidate choice you have before you. Maybe not in every answer we provided tonight because we both care about Milton and want what is best for our citizens. But there is a clear difference in engagement with the community, understanding their concerns, and being a long-standing advocate for what is the best for Milton. For 21 years, I've been listening to and acting on behalf of the people all across Milton. I've touched challenging cases from high-density housing on Ebenezer Road to development pressure for condos in precious commercial space on Highway 9. I have held off sewer expansion into AG1 land on Hopewell Road and stopped an 80,000 square foot grocery store from entering rural Milton. I participated in city-sponsored small business corridor meetings in Deerfield, Crabapple, Birmingham Crossroads since their inception, and that is a short list compared to the hours I've invested in generating the best for Milton on the Planning Commission, where I've helped to write the comprehensive land use plan twice, have vetted countless ordinances, and contributed to the Milton we all know and love today. And to be clear, in every one of those cases, that stretch from one corner of Milton to the other, I was the only candidate who was before you this evening who was there every time. I've gathered the input from citizens from all across Milton and believe I'm the candidate that will best serve Milton for the next 4 years. This is not a time for an untested candidate. I am tested, and I've shown repeatedly that I have protected Milton. Please cast your vote for Paul Moore, who opposes high-density housing, who supports conservative land planning, who wants to maximize active and passive park opportunities, and who will address traffic safety and congestion issues. I respectfully ask for your vote.
Ms. Burds?
Great. First of all, I'd like to thank Paul for his service to our community. We need lots of dedicated people to make this city great, and I hope to become one of those. A good number of people from various aspects of my life urged me to run because they believe I will use my independent, objective judgment to represent you. To quote one of them, "She doesn't owe anyone any political favors. She's here to work for us only and not a hidden political interest. She and I don't agree on everything, but she knows how to listen. She knows how to research and make informed decisions, and she treats people equally and with kindness. She has my vote. I have given much in community service over my lifetime. As I am now semi-retired, I now have the time to also give to our city. I believe my business experience will help prioritize our financial decisions, guide our land usage, anticipate and solve traffic problems and road conditions, and benefit our talented staff. Milton is entering a new phase of its history with the challenges and opportunities of a mature city. That status will require fresh thinking. I will bring creativity to the City Council. Furthermore, I will listen to you, the citizens of Milton, because ideas are a guide to future actions, and your ideas and suggestions are so important to me. I hope I have earned your trust to ask the right questions, listen to your concerns, find the better solutions, make the tough decisions. If so, please vote to allow me to serve you on Milton City Council."
Right, and that will conclude tonight's debate. Thank you for everyone for attending and for those tuning in on Facebook Live. I'd like to thank both of our candidates for agreeing to be a part of this debate. I also want to thank my co-moderator, Mike Petchenik, and our timer, Hans. And also a special thank you to St. Aidan's for hosting the event, including Father Reggie and Officer Manager Carol Sweet. And thank you also to the Milton Rotary and all the volunteers who did behind-the-scenes work to help make this possible, and we all greatly appreciate it. And with that, remember Election Day is November 5th. You can find your polling place for Election Day at mvp.sos.ga.gov. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight.